And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Sheehan. Thank you so much for joining us for coverage here of the last round. So we've got the line is getting a little long for the room here as the top 8 already has a couple of people in it and a bunch are vying to get in. Paul, lined up here at the front for us in the feature match area, we have David Inglis versus Matti Kuisma. And these two players, well, they're going to be in if they win, most likely. It's not a hard lock, right? We're not talking about, well, actually, this one is a hard lock, yeah. But the loser is the one actually who is going to face some serious pressure here. Now, normally that's the case, but sometimes if you get to this point in the tournament, you can actually lose and still make it in. But it looks like for these players, that's going to be difficult, in particular for David Inglis, whose tiebreakers are pretty subpar. If he loses, he's probably not going to make it into the top 8. Matti still has a chance with a loss, but the pressure really is on David here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you took a look at their deck list, I mean, I can't confirm this, but it does seem like these two tested together. They are playing the identical 75 card mirror. And I will say, Marshall, kind of coming into this, Jeskai Mutate also took me by a little surprise, so I made sure I did my due diligence and did some testing. What I did not prepare for, though, is the Jeskai Mutate Mirror. There are only 15 Jeskai Mutate decks, I believe, in the entire tournament, so I didn't think we were going to see too much of that. So really interested to see how this matchup is going to play out.
It's so funny because, you know, as commentators, we have to kind of pick our spots, right? You can't be a full-on expert with every single archetype in the field. Now, I know that you did put some work in because this is one of those decks that isn't intuitive and kind of stands out as that. But come on, the mirror match decide top 8. Who could have imagined it? But here we are, Jeskai Mutate Mirror.
Yeah, and I think one of the key cards in this matchup is going to be Unsubstantiate. Because that is one of the few ways that you can try to interact with your opponent and kind of slow down the combo, right? You can use the Unsubstantiate. I mean, most likely what you're going to see is an Unsubstantiate on somebody attempting to cast Goldspan Dragon, following that up with your own Goldspan Dragon, right? So kind of like, I think, the way that we saw Matti Kuisma versus Seth Manfield play out the other day, you're going to just see both players really just trying to develop their board, get kind of a mana advantage, and kind of make sure that they have enough protection available to resolve their dragon. Because the worst thing that can happen, especially in this matchup, is you go for your dragon, your opponent counters it, and then they combo off on their turn.
As far as the combo goes, we'll get into it when it gets to that point, but it is actually an infinite loop that you can set up that eventually generates you enough mana to be able to recast Prismari Command enough times to kill your opponent. It is convoluted. That's an understatement, by the way. This is a wild combo, particularly for standard. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me that the community can find these type of things, right? I mean, this is a... you had to go pretty deep into the card file to find this particular combo, but it's there. These players tested with each other as well, and even though they live on completely separate parts of the world, David actually lives out here in Seattle near me, and Matti is from Finland, but they've got a 75 card mirror lined up. These players have the exact same deck as each other.
Yeah, and I do have to say, you know, I'm kind of liking Matti's side right now. Plenty of lands here to play over the next few turns. And I don't think David's going to be in a position to try to run out that Goldspan Dragon anytime soon. So you're going to see David continue to try to cycle through his deck to try to hit those land drops with the Prismari Command. But his hand as it is already really strong, right?
It is,
so it's kind of awkward because you want to hit your land drops, but then what are you going to start discarding, right?
Right.
You know, Unsubstantiate seems good. The Dragon seems good. You want Lord Drakius, so...
He needs that card, Expressive Iteration. He needs some way to generate card advantage rather than card quality, which is what he's doing with Prismari Command here.
Yeah, and as you can see, Matti also choosing to play pretty slow here. He already has a full grip, and he has enough ways to interact with his opponent's combo that he's not even choosing to play the Expressive Iteration because he would have to discard a card if he did.
Must be nice. Looks like of the two cards to discard, one of the two unsubstantiates is the one that David knows he wants to discard. The others, he's going to have to decide it's going to be Lord Drakius. hitting the bin, and there's a land for him, but he's just going to fire off Expressive Iteration here. Let's not forget that David also has the 2 treasures at the ready. So in the mana race, he's actually slightly ahead here and about to get further. And look at this. Matti says no way to that Expressive Iteration.
And we've seen this a lot over the course of this weekend. Players being pretty aggressive about countering Expressive Iteration. Just realizing how powerful of a card this is in these control mirrors.
That's right. We've seen Seth do this. And now we see Matti pull this off, particularly if he feels that land drops are in jeopardy. That's a big moment because people will really rely on Expressive Iteration to continue to hit land drops. That isn't the case here, though. David had the backup plan, plays his land and passes the turn with Negate, Goldspan, Unsubstantiate, and another land in hand. He has 4 lands on the battlefield with 2 treasure versus 5 lands going to 6 here on Matti's turn.
Yeah, and you can see here Matti looking to cast this iteration now. He won't have to discard if he does find a land to exile and play. But then just really, looking at the mana that David has access to and thinking through all the different combinations on, how he can potentially lose next turn. And you see David doing the exact same thing here. No Expressive Iteration for you. I can't have you develop your hand. And the thing is, typically, Negate is a type of card that's good against combo decks. But this is a combo deck that mostly relies on casting your creatures and mutating onto them. So Negate doesn't really meaningfully interact with Goldspan Dragon or the mutates.
Right, and interestingly, Matti pointed this out at the news desk as well. Yes, you can use Negate to counter something like an Unsubstantiate or a Prismari command, but oftentimes you're actually just more interested in the I want to target my Goldspan Dragon side of things rather than it needs to resolve. And by the way, speaking of Goldspan Dragon, here it is going on the stack right now. Are we going to see Mystic? No, it's just going to be Unsubstantiate. Return target spell or creature to its owner's hand.
And David got one of those out of his hand, and Matti's not going to be able to punish him here. Probably going to have to run out to seize the spoils here because I think David's just going to try to go for it again next turn.
Yeah, that looked like a win for Matti if you're just sort of glancing at your screen, but he just had to rip up a card there for pure tempo, and he's not able to capitalize on it on his turn.
And keep in mind, these players know their deck list inside and out, right? So they know all the different ways you can interact, and the meaningful ways you can interact against a Goldspan Dragon are the Unsubstantiates, Mystical Dispute, which David can pay for, and just a single copy of Essence Scatter.
Yeah, pretty light on the interaction. A lot of it doesn't matter. You see Fire Prophecy in hand, for example, for Kuisma.
Yeah, but that also feels pretty awful. I mean, you're going to have to cast 2 Fire Prophecies to kill Goldspan Dragon, which will give David 2 treasures as well.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't even matter. Not even a card you want.
Yeah, and Matti, I mean, he is very, very far away from putting anything together here. Doesn't have a Goldspan Dragon, doesn't have any mutate creatures either. You're going to see David just continue to jam and just kind of brute force this combo, knowing that there's not a whole lot Matti can do to interact with just hard casting Goldspan Dragon.
That's right. Put it on the stack. Force you to react to me. And Matti has to decide now if he wants to burn this Unsubstantiate or, God forbid, a pair of Fire Prophecy. Oof.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Matti just goes for an Unsubstantiate and kind of stalls this for another turn, but this is no memory lapse.
Right.
This is card disadvantage, right? You're just buying time, and you're down a card every time this exchange happens.
It's going to hit the battlefield, so Goldspan Dragon exists. It's real. It's here.
All right. Might be time for some Vadrock. And David Inglis does have the Unsubstantiate here. And by attacking first, will allow himself to have plenty of mana here to potentially pay for a Mystical Dispute if a counter war does happen.
That's right. He even has a land drop to give here if he'd like. All right, here we go. Mutate Vadrock Apex of Thunder onto the Goldspan.
And I mean, I can't imagine Matti is going to want to let this resolve. Probably going to want to disrupt this in some way. Could potentially see just a bounce here.
Yep, he could just return the dragon. Now that would let the Vadrock hit the battlefield, but at least it's not the Super Dragon.
Right. at least you kind of break apart the combo element or the value that you get from mutating onto a creature. You can deal with the Vadrock, right? You have 2 Fire Prophecies in your hand. I think David realizing that there's not too much you can do to fight through this, so I think Matty's got to be pretty ecstatic about what just happened here. Sure, David has a lot of mana available, but he can deal with his Vadrock, and now, I mean, there's that Goldspan Dragon that he still has to deal with, but for the time being, David doesn't have an extra mutate creature, at least, to put onto that dragon.
Yeah, that's a one-way street with these 2 cards. Vadrock, Apex of Thunder into hand now for Matti Kuisma. He's staring down a pair of Fire Prophecies as well as a Mystical Dispute that seems to be getting worse and worse.
Yeah, I wonder if he's just going to go for the Prophecy here, maybe discard the Mystical Dispute or the other Fire Prophecy, actually, just to try to dig. Maybe just try to find and draw into a Goldspan Dragon this turn.
That's right. Yeah, something like a Goldspan, Expressive Iteration, some action. He's going to go for the Fire Prophecy.
So now David has an interesting consideration here. He could choose to bounce his Vadrock with Unsubstantiate, right? Save it so that you can run out Goldspan Dragon and mutate again. Of course, this is weak to a second copy of Fire Prophecy, but I don't believe the decks play that many copies.
They play 2.
2 and 1 Scorching Dragonfire.
That's right. But it is a high upside play because blanking a Fire Prophecy also means, you know, he doesn't get to utilize the discard and draw, but it does have a high downside as well. And David decides not to take the risk. He just lets Vadrock go and says, well, I've still got myself a Goldspan Dragon here. Let's see if that thing can get the job done. A land off the top is not what he wanted to see here.
Yeah, so you're going to see a Goldspan Dragon here. And I mean, the pressure's on, right? Goldspan Dragon gets to chunk in for 4 every single turn. Matti, at some point, might be forced to just run out of Vadrock and just put it back on defense. And remember, Vadrock does have First Strike, so he can block. Once First Strike damage resolves, you can go for a Fire Prophecy on the dragon to finish it off.
Now he's definitely going to do that because he drew another copy of Vadrock here.
Yeah, well, he can just go Vadrock Mutate onto Vadrock and try to get some value. That's 2 spells that he can cast from his graveyard.
That? He needs double white for that, right? All of his lands are blue and red. So he has the 1 treasure. Is that... What does Vadrock cost to mutate?
It costs red, and blue-white hybrid. So
you can skip the white if you need to. There.
Right. So you can. So he has the 1 white available to him with the Vadrock, with the treasure that he has.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And then he can mutate onto it. What's funny is if David chooses to unsubstantiate this, Matti can't replay it.
Oh, that would strand it, and he can see that too. I wonder if he just wants to try to ride this Goldspan Dragon to victory. Ooh, there's Seize the Spoils. That has to be one of the better top decks for him here. He's been holding a land in hand forever.
It costs
for
1
this
mana.
very reason.
It's 1 mana, discard a card, draw 2 cards with what he has.
Ooh, another Goldspan Dragon and a Scorching Dragonfire.
Yeah, I think the Scorching Dragonfire is the really big draw here because now, I mean, David can very safely play the Goldspan Dragon, Scorching Dragonfire, and put a ton of pressure here.
I was told this is a combo deck, but apparently it's just cast dragons, attack with them. Not bad backup plan.
Yeah. We can just rename this maybe Jeskai Dragons. That also works. It turns out when you play a deck with Goldspan Dragon, a lot of the time that's all you need.
Yeah, it's true. It really is true that Goldspan Dragons just raw power level can carry it to victory sometimes. And here, it's going to get in for 8. Are we going to see Fire Prophecy here just to get rid of a card for Matt? I mean, how desperate is he at this point?
Extremely desperate. And he has to also fight through this unsubstantiate. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he has any way to get through at this point.
Well, so yeah, his only option here is Fire Prophecy, use the Rummage effect, try to find another burn spell to kill one of the dragons, and then chump block with the Vadrock. You can also block and then cast Sajiri Shelter to make it so that your Vadrock can survive the first attack.
But
However,
he
David
needs to get one dragon off the battlefield.
and not
right?
only that, David still has an unsubstantiate here to
Right.
kind of interact with that as well.
Well, he drew Seize the Spoils, which would normally be okay here, but it looks like it's going to be too little too late because this is just taking up too much mana. He's already invested 5 mana this turn and hasn't actually affected the board yet.
Yeah, and David's considering whether or not he wants to unsubstantiate here, but it's really hard for me to imagine 2 cards that can be drawn here that David can just unsubstantiate that instead, you know?
Right.
But
he's going to go ahead and go for it, and that's going to earn game 1 victory here for David Inglis, and that is really important. As we mentioned coming in, David's tiebreakers are actually quite low. He's sitting at around 56% opponent match win percentage. And just as a comparison, Matty's sitting at around 64. And the gap is huge there. Huge gap. When you look at how opponent match win percentage usually lines up, because you have to do that if you play tournament Magic with any type of tiebreakers in play, you know, it can be decided between a percent or two between players. We're talking about, you know, nearly a 10% gap here. If David does not win this match, he is in dire straits to actually make it into top 8 with a loss. Matty's got a chance. You know, he's gonna have to sweat it out, right? Have a sip of that drink he's got there and cross his fingers to see if he gets in. But David is the one really playing with his back against the wall here.
yeah, and it really interesting to see how both of these players are sideboarding. It doesn't look like they have they're sideboarding exactly the same way. They're both kind of going back and forth here. I'm not sure if Matti Kuisma has Scorching Dragonfire or if he boarded it out. Oh, he did not choose to keep in the Phoenix of Ash, but on the other side, you see David choosing to be a little more aggressive here with Phoenix of Ash here. And the matchup changes significantly here once you sideboard, because both players now have access to 3 copies of Red Cat Melee. So now you have now you have a 1 mana hard removal spell for the Goldspan Dragon. So you can't just kind of run out the Goldspan Dragon and just assume everything's going to be okay anymore. There's just, it is far more punishing now to try to go for that.
Curious to see how things play out post board. In addition to the Red Cat Melee that you just mentioned, Paul, you know, there's a play draw aspect here as well between these two players. We may see them make similar changes based on whether they're on the play or the draw. The assumption here is that David will be on the draw this time.
And it looks like David is leaning towards just boarding out the pieces of the combo entirely. Okay, he's keeping one substantiate in, but just boarding out a lot of the combo because it can pretty easily be broken apart now with the Red Cat Melee. And instead, it looks like both decks are really transitioning into just turning themselves into Izzet control decks. So they're going to play very similarly to the deck, to the Izzet Dragons deck that we've all seen plenty of over the course of this weekend. You see Maze Mind Tomes being boarded in, Expressive Iterations. You're just going to see both players really jockeying for position and just trying to get ahead on resources.
I like that top deck there from David. He started off with Negate Double Dragon, but he drew Maze Mind Tome. Wow, for turn 2. This hand just needed a little something to do in the early to mid game, and he's gone Maze Mind Tome into Expressive Iteration, so just what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, and I imagine you just want to kind of run it out here because next turn your opponent can Mystical Dispute the Maze Mind Tome if they choose. So the only thing that this is vulnerable to is a negate. And you can't be too sad that your Maze Mind Tome is getting unsubstantiated. That's a pretty aggressive play, especially if you think that this matchup is going to become more of a controlling matchup. I mean, you're just down a card there.
That's right. You're just going to run out of cards. I mean, that almost just made the Maze Mind Tome better.
Yeah,
in a strange way.
Yeah, although I mean, I think Matty just believes that this Maze Mind Tome is such a powerful threat that he needs to bounce it and then counter it with the Maze Mind Tome. Of course,
with Mystical Dispute.
With Mystical Dispute, excuse me. But of course, this would have left him vulnerable to a Mystical Dispute if David also had it on his side.
Well, I'll tell you what, he made the card powerful whether he thought it was or not. He invested 2 cards into getting it off the battlefield, and you know, David gets to follow up with Expressive Iteration coming up shortly. Not a lot going on for Matty. He's got Goldspan Dragon as well as a Lore Dracus.
Yeah, and curious to see if he's going to go for it next turn. It seems a bit risky, but I imagine David's going to go for the iteration here, keep mana up. But as it stands currently, David doesn't have an answer to a Goldspan Dragon.
That's right. He will next turn in the form of his own Goldspan Dragon, but that's a risky business right there. So he's going to go Expressive Iteration, take another Expressive Iteration, hit a land drop off of it, and pass the turn back.
I mean, Matty's got nothing else going for him. Does he just go for it, or will he be playing this kind of Drago playstyle and just kind of hope for the best? Hey, he's doing it. He's doing it.
It's funny because the fact that he didn't have anything else actually led him to just go, and throw down a dragon.
I'm sure David's thinking, but I have all this mana. What are you doing?
How could you just run that out? And he kind of gave a head nod like, strong play, friendo.
Good beats.
Yep. And here comes the Goldspan Dragon. So Matti has to be absolutely thrilled about the way that this has played out thus far.
Yeah, and I'm also here really interested to see what he chooses to get with this Lord Drakius, because he has to think there's a really good chance that David can now follow up with his own Goldspan Dragon, could play his own Lord Drakius as well. If you think that that's something that could happen, do you want to just get the Unsubstantiate and try to play this tempo game and finish off David that way? Because you do have the follow-up Goldspan Dragon. If David goes land Goldspan Dragon, you go Unsubstantiate, play your own Goldspan Dragon, boom, David's down to 8. That's a 2-turn clock.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if he can find an answer. Actually, he did. Prismari Command plus Scorching Dragonfire would get rid of the dragon. It's a pretty big cost.
Right, because you would give 2 treasures, and again, I mean, you see that Sajiri Shelter in Matty's hand, right? And any other counterspell would get unlocked. So it seems like it is more likely to be successful by going with the Goldspan Dragon line, where you play it. If your opponent does have a Red Cat melee, at least you'll have the mana to actually negate a Red Cat melee because you get the treasure first from the trigger.
That's right. Yeah, that seems like a much safer line. I mean, what a disaster it would be if you sunk an entire card into trying to kill the dragon, then another one, and then that one gets countered somehow. You're down your entire turn and 2 cards for nothing.
Yeah, and really like this aggressive line here from Matti. You know, it's just like, hey, you're up way more cards than I am. I got nothing. I'm just going to play this and just hope you don't have it.
It's funny because I think if he had better stuff to do,
we
wouldn't have seen that. Yeah, it was almost like lucky that it played out that way. By the way, David is content to take another hit from this dragon because he's cast Expressive Iteration. This is danger zone.
That is very, very dangerous. I'm curious what he's going to look to do. I mean, he could technically just try to go for Scorching Dragonfire plus Spikefield Hazard. That is not going to end well for him.
No, that is going to produce a lot of treasure.
A lot of treasure. We're going to see 2 treasure on Matty's side, and we're going to see the Sajiri Shelter just protect it. I'm sure Matty's feeling pretty great right now.
Yeah, he's like, oh, my treasure's growing. Now he's going to have to use one of them here.
I am down for this. I'm going to protect my creature, play Goldspan Dragon, mutate, and have Counterspell backup for the next turn.
That's right. It's interesting because card economy-wise, this wasn't a disaster for David Inglis, but as far as using his mana goes for the turn, it was.
Yeah. No, and now, I mean, think about it here. Matti has access to 11 mana, even after playing...
Make it 12, Paul.
Yeah, 12 mana. Goldspan Dragon costs 3 mana here. So now, no, back to 11 mana here. We have 11 mana. This mutate is free. And now David Inglis is going to have to fight through 2 counter spells to be able to find a way past these dragons.
I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, critical juncture that last turn for David. Do you just cast the dragon? Or do you try to use multiple removal spells? And it did not work out well.
Yeah. I think David was really looking for a Red Cat melee there. That's what I'm thinking about. Really looking for Red Cat melee. If he hit Red Cat melee, he actually had the mana to go Red Cat melee, then negate a protection spell if you had one in your hand.
Okay, see, that makes sense. That's a high upside play to go for. But as it stands, he's just going to run out of mana here. He's going to go for a Prismari command, but with Mystical Dispute and Unsubstantiate up, he just simply can't cast enough spells. He even found a Red Cat melee here, but as you can see, the protection is there for Matti Kuisma, who looks like he's on the verge of picking up game number 2 here. These players are fighting for a straight-up winning in for our top 8, and they're playing a complicated 75-card mirror between teammates. It doesn't get any better than this, and we're going to get a game 3. I'm thinking here.
Will say though, these players have been a lot more proactive than I initially anticipated. Right? Just you're like, I don't have it. I'm gonna run out the dragon. Deal.
They're
and,
jamming.
More often than not, they couldn't.
That's
right.
They
couldn't.
In fact, the player who just did the aggressive thing in both games won. All right, here comes Red Cap Melee. Trying to put something together, has a negate.
I mean, you could Mystical Dispute and just tap them out first, and that'll guarantee a victory. But it doesn't really matter. This Mystical Dispute will get the negate here, and
that's right.
And
this is going to be a good old-fashioned counterspell fight, but with one player having 2 4/4s on another against the player on 8, that's going to be game. Matti Kuisma picks up the win. Boy, he had the guts to just slam that Goldspan Dragon on 5, and it worked out really well for him. Once that thing sticks, you know, you've got the mana to protect it, any spells you have in your hand, but it can be difficult to get it on the battlefield in this matchup. But he found a window, went for it, and it worked out well for him. Now we get a game 3 between these two.
Oh, yeah. And you can see, I mean, I'm not sure if the team had some kind of a, hey, what do we do against each other in the mirror? Or perhaps even just going, hey, you know what? Let's not come up with a plan for the mirror. And, you know, see what we come up with.
Little agreement. Yeah, I like that. See what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually sounds reasonable, right? Like the person who comes up with the better plan gets an edge, but you work on everything else together. You get an edge against each other.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't fault them either way, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's just an interesting thing to think about. You know, most of the sideboard cards are the same, but David just choosing to be slightly more aggressive with the double Phoenix of Ash here. And then now I think Matti has snuck in a Phoenix of Ash here. Just one, though, you know, keep him honest.
Yeah, it's funny because David does seem to be sideboarding slightly more aggressively than Matti, but Matti's playing more aggressively. He's playing dragons.
Yeah. I can see kind of the main reason why you wouldn't want to play something like Phoenix is just the fact that you just kind of expose yourself to Prismari Command, whereas otherwise there's nothing really in your deck, at least in terms of creatures, that get exposed to Prismari Command. The one nice thing about Prismari Command, though, is it does kill Maze Mind Tome. So you know, the fact that you can have an answer to the Maze Mind Tome, you know, you can do something like kill Maze Mind Tome, make a treasure or loot or whatever. That's pretty powerful. So. Slightly surprising that David is actually going down to just one copy of Prismari Command here, just because Maze Mind Tome did seem like it was pretty strong. But, you know, maybe the games just kind of play out a little bit differently, especially when you're on the play, right? Play draw is very, very important in these types of matchups. And, you know, that kind of also just changes, you know, a couple of cards here and there.
Okay, game number 3 incoming. Let's take a look at the opening hands.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
That's not a good one. Maybe if you had a Maze Mind Tome.
Yeah, no blue mana available here with the cheap counter spells, and then the double Vadrock's a little bit annoying, given that it's legendary. You do have a gold span, but only 2 lander.
David's hand is pretty great here, though. You're on the play. You got a turn 2 Maze Mind Tome. You got a handful of counter spells.
Looks good. Feel like Matti might have to ship this one back. If you find blue mana, is this a great hand?
Not really.
I mean, okay.
I guess you can just start running out Vadrocks. But there's just no you know, after sideboard you have 4 copies of what iteration. Maybe this deck only plays 3, but also a bunch of Maze Mind Tomes. So you can multi a much better hand. There's just a lot of question marks with this hand. You know, sure you have 3 pieces of a combo, right? You have Goldspan Dragon plus Vadrock, but not a whole lot of ways to kind of develop your mana to get there. Perhaps I would consider if I did have a blue source instead of a mountain, right?
Right.
But as is, I mean, even if you draw something like an iteration, you still won't be able to cast it.
Super tough because this is actually already a mulligan, Paul.
Oh, geez.
Yeah,
okay.
So this is a decision to go to 5.
That changes things.
Yeah, so now you're getting rid of a Vadrock, and now you're just like, draw a blue source and give me a chance.
Yeah. I did not see that he had already mulliganed.
I noticed it a little later too.
Right,
All right,
right.
well, here's our 2 lands now for David Inglis. The way is clear for David with no blue mana yet. Oh, there's a miss for Matti. Heartbreak here for Matti Kuisma.
Yeah, the
on
big
the
turn
verge
is
of a
next.
top 8.
Yeah, the big. He still hasn't missed one just yet.
Yeah, just not seeing this blue mana is like.
Yeah. But I mean, David. The only thing that would have maybe been a little awkward is if he didn't draw lands, but he went back-to-back lands here. So no need to scry with the Maze Mind Tome. Just going to get full value here. Oh.
Well, there's a Maze Mind Tome, but is that going to be enough? And also, is it going to resolve? These players seem to value these very highly. If anything, we saw from Matti from game 2 as an indicator.
Matti really wants this to resolve, and I think David's going to shut him down.
I think so too. And this is going to be so devastating because he's going to miss his land drop, and David is going to be able to go, oh my goodness. You see that slight head nod there from David. He says, okay, we are in business now.
Yeah, and this is, and look at that. That's an iteration, but no mana. And David's going to run away with this just in terms of just sheer card advantage here, right? I mean, he's developing his board, roughly at parity here with the cards that Matti has too. And so...
he did draw a back-to-back Vadrox, or he has 2 Vadrox in hand with no white mana, so he's going to have to lean on the Tome. Okay, there's a blue source. It is tapped, though. Ralgren Triumph there for Kuisma, so perhaps a chance. It just feels like he may be too far behind at this point.
Yeah. And, I don't even consider Vadrox a white creature anyways. It's just, it's something that you put onto your Goldspan Dragon once you find it.
Okay, so just any land drops are good then at this point?
Right.
Getting up to that dragon. There's another one.
And it's interesting. I don't know if Matti actually wants the cast iteration because he's going to have to discard given that he found that land.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he plays the land, he can still go Red Cat Melee with and Essence Scatter. He can leave up both. So ideally what he would want to do is maybe go for the iteration next turn, find a blue source, and still have access to Essence Scatter plus Red Cat Melee in case David Inglis does go for a Goldspan Dragon.
Okay, well, we may have a game on our hands here again. Matti Kuisma with, well, all spells in hand outside of this one land that he's going to play this turn. Goes for the white side of it.
All right, there's
another card in hand here. It's a pathway for Inglis. It's also his first white source of mana, and it looks like we're going to see him run out of Vadrox here.
Like, all right, just going to run something out here. Hey, if you have a Red Cat Melee, that's a Red Cat Melee that's not going to my Goldspan Dragon.
That's right. Yeah, use it on this, please. He doesn't have a Goldspan yet, but we know that that ends up being the most important card by quite a bit.
Yeah, this is kind of rough. I mean, Matti does just have a clean answer in the Red Cat Melee, but really might want to kind of save that for a Goldspan Dragon. But, Mystical Dispute's not going to do much. He doesn't have a way to go Goldspan Dragon plus put the Vadrox just yet. Doesn't have enough mana. Could consider an Essence Scatter. But the thing is, he can just take this damage for a while, right?
That's true.
Like it's not a huge deal. And it looks like he's also looking to just fire off the Red Cat Melee here, just to get cards out of his hand.
Another land off the top, though.
Blue source specifically was really, really big.
Yeah,
because now he can go Essence Scatter plus Mystical Dispute. Oh, geez. The card flow just does not stop here for David Inglis.
Yeah, David hasn't been able to do much proactive, but he doesn't really need to. He's got Maze Mind Tome after he already maxed out a Maze Mind Tome and now Expressive Iteration in his hand as well. And now he has another Maze Mind Tome on the battlefield. And he can basically stop Kuisma from resolving anything, at least for a turn.
Yeah, I mean, Kuisma hasn't really drawn any extra cards, right? I mean, David is just so far ahead here in terms of resources. You might see him just run out another Vadrox next turn, honestly. Ooh, not auto tapper. Don't be bad. Let's get 2 blue available here for the double Mystical Dispute. Matti can't really fight this. Oh, he does have a negate. But that will present a shields down moment here. And I think David can just pretty safely go for a Mystical Dispute here and then just fill back up again, right?
Yeah,
just
it does look like it.
Mystical Dispute, draw a card off Maze Mind Tome, Expressive Iteration next turn. I mean, Matty's going to be tapped out here too.
There we go. Mystical Dispute, negate, negate.
This is just, oh, there it is.
That's the Goldspan Dragon of his dreams.
If he draws a land, he's going to feel, no, he doesn't even need a land. If there is a red cat melee, he can just Mystical Dispute it after he gets the treasure. But maybe David is considering just having a land, ensuring that he draws a land this turn just in case because he's so far ahead on cards. But he recognizes that this is his window here, right? Matti only has a single red available to him for a potential red cat melee.
Yeah,
so
that was a disaster.
It looks like he's digging for a land. Gets it.
Yep, and he hits it too. Hengate Pathway off the top here after that scry. So he can get another blue source into play, and here it is. Goldspan Dragon. He makes sure that he leaves all the blue up
Yep,
that he possibly can.
Absolutely.
But as we know, Goldspan Dragon, when it gets to attack here, is going to make a double treasure basically, and that's going to let him protect it.
Yeah, and now he has a few options here, but he can choose to mutate onto the Goldspan Dragon here and give himself negate as an option. But looks like he's just safe having double unsubstat. Wow, that's a mouthful. Double unsubstantiate plus Mystical Dispute here because he has access to 5 mana. And at this point, I mean, you know, it's one of the situations, again, where I think Matti just kind of has to go for it. But this time, David has the answer. You go for this Goldspan Dragon. It's just going to get Mystical Disputed or unsubstantiated. And then Matt can just continue to lock up the game here by just basically mutating onto the Goldspan Dragon and just having enough counters to protect this Goldspan Dragon.
Incredible. Really tough game here for Matti Kuisma. Just struggled to hit those land drops. And while he was struggling, David was building the perfect hand with Maze Mind Tome and then another Maze Mind Tome.
Yep. And I mean, if you're David, you got to just be inside, just doing the fist pump here. You're like, all right, you are so close right now.
That's right.
So close.
He's going to kick off the festivities with an expressive iteration.
It's a Lord Drakis.
There's a Lord Drakis. He'll take that one into his hand.
Oh, geez. And
he's even going to cast another Goldspan this turn off of it. Get in for 8. That's a 1-turn clock. All he needs to do is maintain this board state for 1 turn cycle, and it's GG.
Yeah, and Lord Drakis is, of course, mana neutral. It's free. You spend 2 mana, get your 2 mana back from the treasure. So this basically is just says 2 mana, return a negate from my graveyard to my hand.
And that's going to do it. David Inglis wins the match 2-1 against the mirror teammate there, Matti Kuisma, and locks up top 8. Congratulations to David.